It's clear that Tony Khan is driving all of us to drink. And this is because AEW has been struggling. And I want to do this video. I want to talk about 10 ways AEW can be a lot better. Like, what are 10 improvements that they can make in 2025? The first thing that I want to say is that I want the Hurt Business being the top heel group in AEW, the Hurt Business, the Hurt Syndicate. And the reason is because MVP is a really great mic piece. The other reason is because, I think Lashley versus Wardlow or Lashley versus Powerhouse Hobbs would be matches that everybody wants to see. And also, too, that would make a lot of sense. They could do something about, taking over and dominating and being about money. And then they can also turn, as people are talking about that, like MVP and Lashley don't want to be looked at as black champions or black wrestlers. They want to be looked at as, wrestlers with their own purpose and story. So they can definitely talk about that as well, really, because that's something that a lot of people resonate with. But ultimately, they want to build new stars. They want to target people. They want to be a very powerful faction. I think that they're the right faction to run AEW. And the other reason is that because they make a lot more sense than the Death Riders. Because the Death Riders, you have Moxley with his very confusing dialogue. With MVP, he knows how to articulate himself very well. He knows how to have a goal and a purpose. And he also knows how to, make sense with what he's saying, unlike Moxley. And I think the other thing, too, is that obviously, being in the stages of building their syndicate, they can recruit a bunch of different people. So there's a lot of trust and betrayal going on. And then I think the other thing about that is that it can make new stars. Like I said, if you have Wardlow versus Lashley, like big man versus big man, that'll be good. If you have Swerve versus Lashley part 2, it could be a hardcore or violent match. That could be something great. Or if you even do something like, Bowens and the Acclaim splitting up, or if you do something like Hobbs versus Lashley for the title. And then also you do one thing that I've criticized AEW for is that you have a big man going after a title, going after the heavyweight title and actually winning it. Because, again, who's more believable as a champion, Orange Cassidy or Lashley, or if you have, Hobbs beat Lashley, who's more believable, like Darby Allin or Powerhouse Hobbs. So those things can be created. The next thing that I want to say is that at World's End, storylines need to end. There are a couple of storylines in AEW that have been running on too long that need to die. They should do Mariah May versus Toni Storm. This needs to die because the problem is that they may save Mariah May and Toni Storm all the way until the Australia show, because I believe Toni Storm is from New Zealand or Australia. But the problem is that, this has been going on for over a year and a half. This whole entire Toni Storm starlet thing, if it works for her the rest of her career, she should do it if it's drawing money. But the thing is that they keep cycling back to Toni Storm and Mariah May. There's many other women on the roster that she could be facing that could be big deals. There's Queen Aminata, there's, your champion who is Athena, who has been, the ROH champion for, almost 700 days, and she's not going after an AEW women's championship. That makes no sense. There's, there's definitely Anna Jay and a few other ones that really want to be bigger and better deals, So I really think that, you have to kind of take the ball off of the Mariah May and Toni Storm feud. That has to die. The next one that needs to die is Adam Cole versus MJF. Just get to that. Whatever happens, and they don't cycle back for over a year, and you don't do something where they have a storyline together. They had a very bad storyline in 2023. Since June 2023, this has been almost 18 months, really. This shit needs to just die, really. So get to that, get over it. The next thing is the Death Riders versus AEW. That needs to end because, you have somebody like John Silver and the Dark Order, Jeff Jarrett, Satnam Singh, and a few other wrestlers that are kind of joke wrestlers being in that group. There are people talking about how once again we see Darby Allin, who may be the one to beat Moxley, but he hurts himself again. You see people like Orange Cassidy get title shots when it should be somebody like Mark Briscoe who is more like legitimate, or somebody like, maybe Adam Page has a change of heart and he helps out really, So there's a lot of just, there's just a lot of problems with it. Like I've said, Moxley does not make sense. They're pushing people who are not believable, like Orange Cassidy and Wheeler Yuta, because they have a small body size. Even Darby Allin goes in that group. And then also, too, Team AEW has people in their faction that don't look legitimate, that have lost a lot, really. So you're not building to anything great, really, So I think that you need to just end it and kill it and start something new. And World's End is it should be the show that says, okay, these things, we're wrapping it up. We're going to start something new afterwards. They need to start new feuds. I have some ideas for new feuds. I've said that, I think Hobbs joining the Hurt Business would be an interesting feud, like Hobbs versus Lashley. Like I said, Wardlow versus Lashley, like Big Man versus Big Man. That could be something. Another thing that they could do is they could have Bowens versus Max Caster, or Bowens versus Lashley to really prove himself. You could also do Adam Cole taking over AEW, because there could be a lot of things about that. You see like the Undisputed Kingdom, they say like something like, we just beat Max, now we want to take over AEW, we want everything. We see all these other teams that are stepping up. Don Callis has a belt. The Hurt Syndicate, they're going to have a belt someday. Lashley looks like a world champion. We spent so much time on conquering MJF. Now we're going to conquering AEW, and that's also good because, like I said, you have Wardlow, a big man. So you need to have your big man, in a prominent spot, really go after titles and be a legitimate threat. I think that would be really good. People would want to see that out of Adam Cole. The next one is MJF versus Daniel Garcia. I know they've had some stuff, but I think you need to have MJF versus Daniel Garcia, passing of the torch. I think, you can do a 2-month, 3-month feud with this. There are people who doubt that Daniel Garcia is legit, or people say like, he tries too hard. He almost hams it up when he shouldn't be hamming it up, really. So I think that MJF versus Daniel Garcia would be good. I would also even like to see Daniel Garcia versus Adam Copeland, because it's like the old dog trying to pass like the torch. Really, that would be a really good one. The next one, I want to see Jericho versus Dustin. I've talked about this many times. I think that if you want the Texas show to sell out, Dustin Rhodes, the hometown wrestler, getting his first, title would be good. And you can kind of do that storyline of Jericho being privileged and at one time deserving it. Now he's cheating. Now he's kind of being a jerk with that, where Dustin encourages honor and teaching the next generation, not taking advantage of the next generation. How Jericho is using like younger wrestlers and all that. That could be a good storyline. That could be a storyline with Dustin winning the ROH championship, defending it for a while. Then he has a match with Sammy, he passes it on to Sammy. And that's that, really. That would be really good. And then the next one that I have is Mercedes Moné versus Athena. I think that would be a good one because, like I've said, she's the CEO. She's been holding the TBS title for a long time. Athena's been the ROH Women's Championship. If she's been champion for over 600, 700 days, I would think that she would want to be on, regular television, on regular pay-per-views, getting that pay-per-view money, and actually going after a title on AEW programming, and actually being somebody that would hold their top women's belt for a long time. Really, that means a lot more than an ROH title. So that needs to be something. The next thing that I will say is that they need to hire new storyline writers. And I would also say Tony Khan should really think about hiring fantasy bookers. So, there's myself. There are a couple people online who get like tens of thousands of views or more. And Tony should have conversations with those people and be like, okay, I really like your story, like your direction. We're in a bit of a clusterfuck. You know what? I want to, hire you for some ideas, really, and then if somebody books very well, he can be like, okay, I'm paying you like maybe $5,000. But if the pay-per-view does well, there's a lot of like money being made, okay, then that could be like a $10,000, $15,000. But he has to be results driven if he wants to hire people who do good fantasy booking and people who do good storyline writing. I think like what he has now is not working. So it may be good to kind of like, get rid of those people, out with the old, in with the new, get rid of what's not working and find what is going to work. He needs to do a mass talent release. I think there's over 170 wrestlers. There's people like John Silver, Brandon Cutler, who should not be having jobs. You look at somebody like Mark Henry, who should not be there. You kind of ask yourself, you look at somebody like Paul White, what has he kind of contributed? And, I know that may seem mean and stuff like that, but there needs to be a mass release of talent. You look at Mercedes Moné and you kind of say, like, okay, she has great pay-per-view matches, but she's a bad, talker. But there needs to be a mass release of wrestlers. And I think that'll also be really good because it says to everybody, even though you've been sitting at home, the ones who've been sitting at home, if it's not been profitable for AEW, I want you out of the company, really. And that may be controversial, but that's also been a good call, really. Because, again, you look at something like Keith Lee, what has Keith Lee had done for AEW? I know he's been out with injury, but you have to kind of send a message to everybody that if it's not working out, you don't deserve to be here, or if there's no future in you making money, if I don't see you being profitable for AEW, why should you be here? Like, why should John Silver, the premier athletes, Wheeler Yuta or Kip Sabian, why should those people be collecting a check, really? Because they really don't contribute to anything, really. They need to be, done like dinner, really. So a mass release would be good. It would also make all the wrestlers be like, oh shit, I'm not being booked. Or Ricky Starks or people like him being like, okay, like he said, he wanted to do a storyline as a heel. They want him to be a babyface. He's choosing to sit at home. It may inspire him to be like, okay, I don't want to be out of a job because WWE may not give me that call, really. Maybe Cody may not help me out, really. So a mass release, I think, would be good. The next thing they need to do, number 6, would be they need to have pay-per-views with a purpose. I like what Stevie Richards says. So, this is what you do. That a World's End is really just, ending the year, ending storylines, hinting at new storylines. And then what you do is that your first pay-per-view of the year, I would say, should be, if you want to go international, it should be Grand Slam, where you introduce new storylines and new feuds and new characters, because that's what they're doing in Australia. But if that's not successful, you save that to a Revolution. I think that, do a special event in Australia. I would say Revolution should be the show where you actually just, have that. I'm not sure they're going to keep Grand Slam, but if they don't keep Grand Slam, Revolution needs to be your beginning of the year show, new feuds, new storylines, and all that good stuff. I think, as I said, with this year, with Sting retiring, what they should have done is that they should have just had, how should I kind of say that? With Sting retiring, they should have just had new feuds and new storylines. They should have emphasized that more. The sun's setting on the old man, and here's the next generation. Dynasty, there's no purpose to Dynasty, but that could be a Dynasty could almost be like a Night of Champions type of show. You defend all the titles, and I think that would be good. Because a Dynasty, what do you think is? It's something that you want to continue forever, like a championship, and that should be like their Night of Champions show. Double or Nothing, that should be like their midsummer, Las Vegas show. That should be the Anarchy Arena show. That should also be, again, the Casino Battle Royale contract where you can get an opportunity at any time, really. So that should be like their summer show. Forbidden Door, yes, that's a good thematic one. It's AEW versus AAA versus NJPW, and then they need to have Blood and Guts. I would say Blood and Guts needs to be like their hardcore show where they term the violence, and they need to pick a good time of year for that. And then they need to have All In, and All In's kind of like their WrestleMania type of show. All Out, I would think, would be kind of like, it's kind of like the Vengeance type of show, like a Vengeance Day type of show, where it's like, okay, people are mad that, they weren't on All In, or they lost it All In, or they feel like they could get another shot at championship, or they want to kind of have some retribution or start a new storyline or whatever, really, so that should be like what All Out is about, and then Wrestle Dream I know it's an Antonio Inoki show, but um, I would say that, this also should be another show where they really should think about the purpose. They cannot make this an Antonio Inoki tribute show because eventually that's going to lose its power. Like, for example, you don't see AEW presents Owen Hart every single year because, even though he's been dead for 20 years, rest in peace, Owen Hart. Over 20 years, you can't do you can't dedicate a show and make it about him. Like, for example, you will not make a Halloween pay-per-view called WWE presents Bray Wyatt, or WWE Firefly Funhouse, because in 20, 30 years, nobody's going to know who Bray Wyatt is. Not that it's not an insult. It's just that, it goes on with time. It's not a good show, really. So I think with Wrestle Dream, you can kind of do maybe a bit of you can kind of use Wrestle Dream as like a bit of a maybe as like a bit of another like type of New Japan versus AEW type of show. You probably can like maybe have a little bit of that, but mostly AEW matches, like a little bit of New Japan Pro Wrestling. I also like how Wrestle Dream is in the Pacific Northwest, so they kind of keep it in that area. Like, that's the Pacific Northwest show. I have no problem with that, because that's going to make it feel like, okay, that's where they go to the Pacific Northwest. The next thing is Full Gear. That's like the Thanksgiving Day show. I would kind of say that, it really should set up the Continental Classic. And then, World's End is World's End, really, so those should be all the shows, really, and I think that would be good. Like, every show has a bit of a purpose, really, and I would say that, they have to revamp ROH. Like I've said, I think that, they want an ROH television show. So ROH needs to be their developmental. So you take all the wrestlers that you have, maybe some wrestlers from Dustin's like gym or academy, and from some of the other wrestlers who have academies, and they have like these guys, face off. They have these people talk on the microphone. They have these people get really fired up. They want to be in AEW, and then you do something with them. You take some wrestlers on the AEW roster, and you kind of are like, okay, this is like your last chance. You kind of do. You see Sammy Guevara, you're like, okay, what would happen if we gave him the ROH title? What would happen if we put him in a big and serious spot? What would happen if we, put somebody like, John Silver or Evil Uno in that, and we kind of see where they go. And if it's not working, it's not working. And then you take some wrestlers like maybe the Righteous, and if they're kind of doing well and it seems like they can do something, you move them over to like a Collision or a Dynamite. Like, this is kind of like really the whoever you purchase from ROH, the developmental people, and then also maybe some veterans, really. And then they all kind of like, they bring the best out of each other. And then ultimately, the people who don't have it, you let go of them, really. So, and then it also should be like where you kind of do the open invitational. Like, if you want to do something like, if you want to have like an international wrestler, like if you want to do like, Dustin versus Tomohiro Ishii, or Minoru Suzuki or other ones, that this will be the show to do that, because that way you kind of get an influx of different talent, really. So that's kind of what I would say, that you need to do that. You need to have more story driven. You need to kind of maybe have an ROH recap on Dynamite or Collision, really, so people know what's going on, really. And I think that every single time you have a pay-per-view, like you just had Full Gear, and one of the criticisms I have is that you didn't announce that you're having a ROH pay-per-view on that show, really. Like, whenever an ROH pay-per-view is coming up, you need to advertise that. You need to say, okay, we're double dipping. We're going to have an ROH show, and we're also going to have a World's End type of show, really. I just don't like this, anti-advertisement of ROH, because that is beyond, pardon my language, retarded, because you would want to do that. If you have two shows where you're trying to draw money and have people pay a good price for, it makes no sense to only advertise AEW shows. You got to advertise both of them. So they really need to revamp ROH. They also need to do a mass recruiting. And what that means is, this is number 8, mass recruiting. Mass recruiting means that, you look at everybody who's sitting at home. You make it's either, you show or you go. So that's Miro, that's Ricky Starks, that's Powerhouse Hobbs, That's Adam Copeland and a few other people. I know Hobbs is back, but Adam Copeland, he did say something like he is helping out during some of the hurricane efforts. Like if he can get off his ass and do that, he can come back to the company really. So you look at everybody who's sitting at home who can make the money. If Keith Lee's fat ass is at home, and he can work, bring his fat ass there. I have no problem with Keith Lee. I'm not trying to insult the man, but I'm just making a point, really. You get people off their dead asses and you bring them back to AEW. You utilize the best of your roster. You have people like Mark Henry who could be a great announcer for pay-per-views or other big events. You have Paul White who wants to have matches. You look through your roster, you look at everybody who's sitting at home, and you say, like, okay, I'm recruiting you from your home, really. And if they say no, you just fire them on the spot, really. And that's what needs to happen. You need to build the strongest roster that you can. The next thing that I would do is that you need to separate the belts. That 100%, I think AEW, I've said this before, the AEW Dynamite should have the World Championship, but the World Championship can be on Collision, and it could also be on ROH if you want to do a show where it's the ROH champion versus the AEW champion, or a rookie on ROH who has a lot of potential going against the AEW champion to prove themselves. AEW Dynamite should have the tag team championship, and it should have, I would say, the TNT championship as well. So it should have like those three titles and also the women's AEW championship. So 4 of them. And then on Collision, it should be the Trios Championship, the TBS Championship, the International Championship. Sometimes you can have the AEW Heavyweight Champion there for storylines. But if it's not right, you should have the ROH Champion there, just to kind of make that show mean something. Be like, okay, it's not just, ROH. To make sure that title has some relevance as well, really. If you have a good match, or, there's somebody on the roster that's like saying, I want to take on the ROH champion, or, the ROH champion saying, like, we're having a show this weekend. I want to just, have a warm-up match with somebody on this roster and all that stuff, really, So that's the stuff that you do. You separate the belts, really. And that way, it's easy, it's more digestible. You don't just have like so many belts on one show, really. And then also, the Continental Classic title, I like what they're doing, the Continental Classic Championship, but I really think they need to get rid of that. It makes no sense to have that. It should be kind of like it should be one of those things where it should be kind of like a King of a Ring, like a tournament thing, and then the winner should face the champion at like New Year's Revolution or the first pay-per-view of the year. That's kind of how I would do it. It doesn't make sense to have a, for example, like you don't have a King of a Ring championship, because then that means, it's not just a title that you get at a show. It's just something that you defend all around all year. I think they need to get rid of the Continental Championship. It makes no sense to do that. So they need to separate the belts. They need to look at some of the belts that they need to get rid of. That's number 9. And then number 10 is that they need to replace Tony Khan. This means that, as some people said, and now OTR Central has said this too about Tony Khan, that he may be a great promoter. He's definitely a great promoter in the sense that, he got them at Wembley Stadium. He got them at shows around the U.S., really, and in Canada, and also in the United Kingdom. And that's very good. He's not doing the Dixie Carter thing about running shows at Jacksonville every single week. So I respect Tony Khan for that. So maybe you need a new general manager. And the general manager could be Mark Henry. It could be Paul White. It could be, Ricky Starks. It could be, MJF. It could be somebody that is the general manager that he appoints, really. That way Tony's off television for a while. The next thing is that he needs a booking committee. So it's a bunch of people, and as I said, it should be some of his writers, it should be some fantasy bookers, and they really need to come up with good ideas. And there needs to be a sense of, okay, if there are a bunch of good ideas that Tony is hearing, but he doesn't approve them, he needs to be ruled out, really. There needs to be a sense of saying, okay, for example, if they want to do something like Hobbs versus Bobby Lashley, at a pay-per-view, I'll be for that. But if they want to do something like where Hop says, like, you know, I'm big, I'm black, I'm jacked. What would happen if you have the I'm big, I'm black, I'm jacked match, and you're gonna call that a match on a pay-per-view? You know, if Tony has that idea, hypothetically, there'll be people that would strike that down and say, okay, you know what, Lashley does not want to be booked as an African American joke, really, and you need to understand like why African Americans don't like that, because they don't want to be associated with silliness, because that's happened so much. Or if you have something like you want to have Orange Cassidy versus John Moxley too at World's End, and if he wants to do that, there has to be a lot of people saying no, that's a bad idea. Right now, it looks like they're going to have, you know, it's probably going to be Moxley, Jay White, Adam Page, at World's End and they should have Darby Allin in that as well. And if not Darby Allin, it should be like it should be a triple threat match. You know, that seems like the direction that they're going in. Wouldn't make sense to put Christian in that, you know, because why would he want to be in a match like that if he already has a championship that he can use at any time? It doesn't make any sense, really. But the point of it is that you need somebody that's in that can overturn Tony and put in better ideas, really, you know. So I think that, you know, he's demonstrated that with all the power that he has, he's made a bunch of bad choices. So you need to kind of, you know, take away some of that power, because that's how it works in business. You know, if you can't prove, if you're detrimental, things have to change. You know, if you're detrimental, you know, there has to be changes to make things profitable, you know, and that's what I see from him. I think that getting people into stadiums, you know, having shows all over in different markets, finding smaller arenas. I'm very proud of him for canceling some big arena places. If that's what he can do best, then that's what he can do. If he can make really great pay-per-views and production value, and maybe, you know, making go a little bit longer than it should, like every pay-per-view feeling like a WrestleMania worthy, then he needs to stay with that. But I think that if his storytelling is bad and building new stars and everything's kind of like a clusterfuck, you know, then he needs people to step in that area and have more power than him, really, because clearly it's not working, you know. So these are my suggestions on how to make AEW better. You know, salute.